name is Ryan Cam, and welcome to the beginning of my road to Deadpool and Wolverine. With Deadpool and Wolverine coming out at the end of the month, it's high time for me to review some X-Men movies. All of the 20th Century Fox X-Men movies except for New Mutants, because that one just doesn't count. But this is going to be a fun journey, and to kick things off today, we're going to be talking about the one that started it all, X-Men from the year 2000. And by we, I mean joining me from 3D Movie Cinema to talk about this one. It's one third of the Small Talk podcast. It's Jacob Collins, who is reading the entirely wrong comic for this.
Hey, oh, hello. Wait a minute. We're doing Watchmen, right? Watchmen?
Nope, wrong one. Maybe if
Well,
I
son of a bitch. I read the movie. I watched the movie. I literally just finished the book. I'm like, all right, now let's talk about Dr. Manhattan and the whole themes of, oh, this is so bullshit. You know what? I'm done. Fuck this. I'm out of here. Bye. I
well,
was joking. I was like, that's where we were like,
it's the
wow, that's coming.
it's the April Fool's prank all over again. This movie was released in the year 2000, and it was basically like finding a canteen of water in the desert, because even though we all love Batman and Robin with our whole hearts nowadays, in 97, it was the absolute wrong movie to be released at that point. Blade did some work for goodwill, but it was an R-rated zombie movie with Wesley Snipes, or vampire
Vampire movie.
Wesley Snipes, excuse me.
Zombies would be interesting.
It'd be very interesting.
Technically, they did kind of do that way with the second one. Made them like hybrid
That's
zombie
true.
vampires.
But X-Men was the one that made the difference. It was this and then Spider-Man that came out 2 years later. This was the one that launched like Marvel to a point where it is today. Comic book movie universes and comic book movies were barely a thing. And so this was like the thing that launched everything to a point that I would argue is still being felt to this very day. If this movie had failed, I don't think we'd be talking about an MCU, a DCU, or anything in that regard. Or even if they would still exist, I don't think they'd be at the same level they are now, I would argue.
X-Men really changed the game, and I remember like watching this because I had not. I've seen the animated series, but because I was so young, I was so dumb to where I didn't understand that like to me like I never understood that X-Men 2000 and X-Men animated were the same thing. I honestly were just like, because like to me, I didn't even know Batman 89 existed. Like the only movie I understood that existed was Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. So those are my two movies growing up as a kid. And so I never really, I was like, ooh, Batman for Robin, Batman and Robin. I'd watched that 1,000 times. And so my uncle, who had bought the VHS, introduced the VHS to me, which honestly, ironically, that VHS is on your shelf. Not the same one, but I'm saying you have that VHS, like, of X-Men. And yeah, he introduced me to that. And I just remember seeing the cover had people walking in, like it looks like the X-Files almost, where it has people walking out of a light, like alienish, and has like an X symbol around them. And,
Yeah.
you see like their side which to be fair, people would say, no, that's a shitty poster. That's a shitty poster. Which I
Well,
say that's a cool poster. That is a cool poster, in my opinion.
the one that was my desktop background for a lot of years was this one, and I'll put it in post. I know the one I'm talking about, but I can't think of it. But it's got Wolverine, Cyclops, Magneto, and Mystique, and several of them all in shadow. And it has like I said, I'll add it in later, but that was like my desktop background for years. I loved that poster so much. But
Was it the X-Men 2000 like character poster had all of them? I know they had one where it had them all slashes like that Cyclops, Wolverine, Storm, and then they had
that
like the
one, the slash
Brotherhood
one, that
where
was
it
it.
has like Sabretooth, Toad, which by the way, this movie, it's a really dark film.
It
By
is.
the way, this movie is really, it starts out in the concentration camp. Like, you're just
Well,
like, damn.
before we jump into that, I did want to bring up this because I thought it was rather fascinating. This movie had been trying to get made since the mid 1980s. They had James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow in the discussions for doing this, and they both turned it down. And other names included Ed Solomon as a writer, Christopher McQuarrie, and Joss Whedon, which all of them turned it down for various reasons.
Well, didn't Joss Whedon do a draft on this or something? Because he said that the only scene that made it from his draft is Wolverine giving the middle finger. He said that's in my draft.
That
He
makes
said that's the only thing.
total
He
sense.
said like he goes everything else. He says he said the only thing that's in the movie. He said there's only two things in that movie that are from my script. One was the Wolverine flips off the middle finger. That's in my script. And then whenever Cyclops like, hey, prove it. He goes, you're a dick. Okay.
That sounds very much like a Whedon thing to do. But
He said that's the only thing that's in my script. Everything else, I never wrote one single line. He said that's why I received no credit for this. Only David Hayer received credit because he said I didn't write anything in this movie besides that. Which to me, I would say, hey, they said John would get credit even if you wrote two freaking lines.
also, what I found interesting was that Beast and Nightcrawler were supposed to be in this one, but they got cut due to budgetary reasons, which considering the fact
Let's
that
just be glad they were.
this movie had a $75 million budget, that must have been like 300 million in that in 2000 money. Like you brought up, Jacob, this starts very much in a concentration camp. It basically starts out like Schindler's List, but as a superhero movie almost. And you get a brief glimpse of Eric Lensher as a young boy. And they would touch on this in X-Men First Class, which that'll be a review that I'll be joined by Matt Wyatt for, just a preview of that. But it's got a great shot where Eric is being separated from his parents and he's trying not to let him go, but he's got his hand outstretched and he pulls the gate back, which is the first glimpse of the Magneto that we would all know. And he would have probably torn down the entire fence if that soldier hadn't come out and just hit him in the face with the butt of a gun. That set the tone immediately.
And somewhere Kevin Bacon was sipping tea watching the whole thing out of a window.
That's very true, yes. But then we parlay that into our human villain for the movie, Senator Robert Kelly, who
Well, actually, we go to Mississippi, which is where I'm from, and Rogue, which ironically, really is Canada, that they're just saying is Mississippi, because the whole movie shot in like Vancouver
I
or
swear
Montreal.
between Smallville and this, I'm just going to assume everything is shot in Canada just for the sake of simplicity.
I mean, to be fair, the X Mansion is the Luthor Mansion.
That is true. Yeah, we touched on that like in episode like 2 or 3 of Small Talk. I can't remember off the top of my head. But we get with that concentration camp scene, and then we see the meeting for the Mutant Registration Act. We then see Professor X played by Patrick Stewart, and we see adult Magneto played by Ian McKellen. And I love the scene where these two meet for the first time.
What are you doing here? Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
There's an overwhelming feeling throughout the remainder of these movies, or at least as long as Stewart and McKellen were in them, that they have an abiding respect for each other, but they just disagree on one thing, and that one thing just cost them their entire friendship. You could tell they were friends at one point, and it would be explored in First Class, but here it doesn't really need overly explained. You can just tell that these two were friends. And the scene ends with Magneto going, "We are the future, Charles, not them. They no longer matter."
Like I love the scene with Famke Jensen, who basically she's a wonderful actress. She doesn't get enough credit. Like a lot of people always praise like Sophie Turner or like they never praise her as much, because I feel like she is so good as Jean Grey. Like she did three amazing. Look, even if I don't like X-Men 3, but like I think she did a great job in all three movies. And I even liked her cameo. I even liked her in the Wolverine, even though I think the movie's okay, but like I like her, and I honestly hope we see her again in Deadpool and Wolverine because I just love seeing her as Jean Grey. And I think honestly, she is really like she's trying to explain. Like I love the line where she's talking about that's like when the Senator Kelly was talking about should people have to register because in the comics it was about the X-Men were about civil rights. So and when Stanley and Jack Kirby created the X-Men, they were like it was the idea of like Martin Luther King was essentially Charles Xavier and Malcolm X was Magneto. That was essentially like they were like there were two different like Martin King's like we need a peaceful protest, and Malcolm X if they get in your face you push them, and that was essentially like the two opposing forces. Like one was like, we need to use our words, and one was we need to use brute force. And I think that's how they oppose it between Magneto and them, because Magneto's like, look, we're gonna have to. Magneto basically has an idea of saying, hey, we should just turn humans into we should turn all the humans into mutants, and then like it would be mass genocide basically, because you're wiping out an entire race, you're an entire group of a species of people, because in which I love. By the way, Ian McKellen does. I love Fassbender more as Magneto, because you get to see it gets really deep and down versus McKellen, who I feel like I love McKellen, but I feel like his Magneto is more of a his Magneto is more is a villainized Magneto, where even though he gives Shakespearean dialogue, I feel like I can't as relate to him much, because based off these movies, the three movies he's in, not including Days of Future Past, but the three movies, he never gives, like, you only hear his backstory, and you could side with him in some stuff, but mostly it's like, I cannot side with you. Versus when you see him in the prequel trilogy, you can side with Magneto because you understand everything he's gone through. It's not really his fault. He's just put on this villain's path. And I think with this one, like, you're just saying, like, okay, yeah, I get it. At the beginning, you were in a concentration camp. And like when you see, and I love that him and Charles see this, like when Senator Kelly, who's basically this bigot, in which Bryan Singer, when he, regardless how you feel about him as a director or a person, he did a great job directing this movie. And I like how he brought, because he's a bisexual male, he brought, like he said, this is basically an LGBT issue, where he brought this in where it's like, this is gay rights essentially in the 90s, where it's like, like mutants are like, oh, the idea when they're talking about should your child be taught by a mutant is how you taught by a gay person be able to teach your child, and essentially that is the idea of like, should they have to read, like the human, like they're taught mutants, should the mutant be able to teach, should a mutant, what stop a person that can walk through walls into the White House, and they're like, and I love that idea, like, like how these people, and Magneto's watching this and he just turns and says, like, he goes, okay, now I need to act. Like, he's watching Senator Kelly. And like people don't realize, well, how did Magneto even know about Senator Kelly? He was watching the exact same thing Charles was watching. And he was basically saying, like I feel like he was watching, saying if Jean Grey can do something, if Jean can stop Senator Kelly from passing this bill. And if he's like, okay, can't, okay, well, now it's time for the Brotherhood to step in. Now Mystique. Because he knows Mystique is there. In disguises. Which there, if you read the comics, Senator Kelly is not really, like, Henry Guyek is the villain. His assistant is actually should have been Senator Kelly, Robert Kelly. Robert Kelly's actually a good person. That like it should have been Senator Kelly should have been the president. Robert Kelly should have been the president of the United States in X-Men 2. And then Henry Guyek should have been the villain in this movie. Because that right there, because Senator Kelly was just someone who had opposing views. Like basically the president of X-Men 2, that is basically Robert Kelly in the comics. And Henry Guyek is someone who hates mutants. He's basically William Stryker. And William Stryker is not even the guy who gives Wolverine. Like they mess up a lot of the continuity in the comics, like just making stuff and stuff.
What?
But I will say Sabretooth, just like Sabretooth in this movie is just a henchman. And I honestly was like, I like Sabretooth. I think he looks scary as hell, and I love him. And even though people like, there's continuity issues, people say in X-Men or Wolverine, like, oh, he looks nothing like he does in X-Men. But if you think about it, these are kind of two different Sabretooths, like I was telling you last night. Like there's Victor Creed, which they never say his name is Victor Creed. They always say it's Sabretooth. That's all. He's a henchman, and Magneto's name is Sabretooth. And the other one in the X-Men is Victor Creed. They always say, they never refer to him as Sabretooth. So I think in the Fox universe, it's kind of, even though they never, I'm sure they say, oh, well, it's Sabretooth. But I kind of see it as two different people. Like there's Victor Creed and then there's Sabretooth. Victor Creed is Wolverine's brother. Sabretooth is just this monster that wants to kill Wolverine that works for Magneto. And I love, what do you think about Hugh Jackman?
Well, there's a lot to unpack with what you said, and we'll unpack it in a second. But to answer your question, I don't think, maybe outside of Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, there has been a more perfect casting for a role. Like some of these 20th Century Fox X-Men movies get awful, like genuinely borderline unwatchable stuff. Hugh Jackman
Dark
makes
Phoenix.
it Origins. He makes it work. He makes it at least halfway tolerable. And it goes to show that he was only like a couple movies in by this time. He was in Kate and Leopold. He was on Oklahoma, on the West End in London. So he was known in certain circles, but this was the thing that launched him. And just from the very beginning, his introduction is epic. He's in that bar in Canada, I assume. He's in the cage. He knocks the dude out. Well, the dude like punches Wolverine's knuckles, which that was a mistake. And then Wolverine just like, up, oh, you're dead, knocks him out. And then you just go from there. You see his budding relationship with Rogue. You see him heal, which is still a great effect to this very day. And then you just see the seeds being planted for understanding that Wolverine is very powerful, but also is a very damaged person.
When they come out, does it hurt?
Every time.
He doesn't know why his claws are metal. He doesn't know why he even has claws, period. But he just wants to live his life as peacefully as possible, but that's just never going to be in the cards for him. And Jackman
He just wants to be left alone.
Exactly. And people always bother him, which is their first and only mistake because they're going to be on the business end of those claws. But Jackman not only conveys the tragedy of it, but also just in general the overall like attitude and like sarcasm of it, because you touched on with the whole scene of stop, freeze, and Cyclops is like, prove who you are, is like, you're a dick. Okay, we're good. Like the Cyclops Wolverine dynamic just gets to a great start here. But then the scene where he's talking to Storm, where Storm is like help us, fight with us, and Wolverine's like, oh yeah, be an X-Man, that you're a mutant. They're gonna hate you no matter what. That scene is so good. And I don't hear anybody talk about it nowadays.
It always creeps me out how Mystique kidnaps him. And he goes, Pilot, and he goes, people like you were a reason I was afraid he was good. She is so good as Mystique.
Shout out to Ray Park for doing the stunts on this one, fresh off of the Phantom Menace. Like Ray Park was in his bag in this era. Like between Darth Maul and this, like Ray Park was just outstanding.
And he's also the Headless Horseman in Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow.
I forgot about that. Yeah, he was, and he was really good in that too. That kidnapping scene, like you mentioned, that was just like you mentioned, that was so creepy. And then the fight in Ellis Island with Wolverine, and she's just like dancing around him, and it's really Logan just kind of she has the best death of the movie where Logan's like, there's just one problem. You're not part of the group.
Oh, but there's a problem. You're not part of the group.
Like that chills every time.
Rebecca Romijn as Mystique, she's so good because like usually like now, like especially in 2000, they would not make like a woman, like a female, like, oh, we're not going to give a female super villain, we're gonna make him fight with the male. Like instead they're like, you know what, Mystique's gonna kick ass. Like nowadays they would do this, they would do a fight scene like that, but like they literally just made him like and her like go at it where it's like boom boom, and like when she's just like literally like like all of a sudden I love though like how Hugh Jackman is like whenever he goes and cuts her, she goes ah! I'm just like how Hugh Jackman having to react to it, then just add her voice in. Also, I love I love Magneto's speech when he's giving to Senator Kelly about how he goes, "Do you fear God, Senator? I've always seen God as a teacher, the bringer of light." And he says, "Do not fear God, Senator, not anymore, and don't fear me, not anymore." Which I honestly like, especially how there's like scenes in the movie. Like for instance, the scene like with like whenever like Senator Kelly leave, like I laugh so hard whenever he tries to get Sabretooth to pull Senator Kelly up and he falls to his death. And then he's like, Sabretooth's like, makes the face like, like he's just, that makes me laugh. He pulls his shirt, he's see the fall to his death. He's like, and then he looks over at Magneto. Magneto's like, and then he shoots God, and then Magneto just gets pissed off and then walks away and then closes and locks him in. Like that's your punishment. That is your punishment for.
Like I love when Kelly realizes that he can like go through the bars, like he's basically liquid, and he's hanging on. He's like, "What the hell have you done to me?" And Magneto's like, Senator, this is pointless. I love that so much.
You're a natural one of us. Especially, I like how, like, and then also Toad is funny too, where he's like telling say at the beginning whenever and Xavier runs away like a little bitch after the X-Men shows up, and then like Toad's sitting there spraying the Statue of Liberty. He says, "Why aren't you supposed to bring someone back with you?" And then he goes, "Oh, all right." And then he just smiles. Like, I like Toad is like, yeah, and also I like this subway, this train station sequence is so good.
Yeah.
Especially like I love how literally like when Wolverine and Rogue are in the train station, all of a sudden like you see Sabretooth just runs up, knocks a dude out, and grabs her by the throat, throws her against the glass, and says, "Scream for me!" And then Cyclops, I like how Toad climbs up the wall and then goes, and then Toad's like, "Shh."
He uses his
And
tongue to knock out Cyclops' glasses, so is like
which is a
his
bold
rays
fucking
going
move,
all
by
over
the
the
way.
place. And then
That's a bold move.
And Wolverine gives him shit for it too. He's like, I wasn't the one that gave the Grand Central a new sunroof, pal. Like,
Which, yeah, and I like how then it makes way for Sabretooth to get struck by lightning, and then Toad just John says, "Quit laying around," and like I love it. The scene like I really like is like when Magneto used the train and Wolverine, like Hugh Jackman said he got the shit scare out of him because the way it was practically done, the train how it opens up was practically done. And he said he actually there's a scene in the movie where he actually when it opens up he's kind of scared, like he said that actually was legitly scary because he says I was terrified because that was so practically done. And I love how you see Magneto just fly through and he goes, "You must be Wolverine," and then he just how he takes his that whole body does it, and he just takes it and does this, and he's just you could feel like that pain, even though the way you see his claws, you feel that pain in them. Like he goes, "What the hell do you want from me?" He goes, "My dear boy, whoever said I wanted you?" And then he looks at Rose, and then he knocks her out, and then he runs, and then that needle he throws in the Magneto, just takes a needle, and just and she goes to the ground, goes, "Young people." That then the police sequence.
oh, I love
Man.
that so much. I'm glad you brought that up before we bring things to a close. But that whole scene is epic too, where starts out and then Professor X takes over both Beast and Toad. And then Magneto's like, why not come out where I can see you, Charles? I'm like, because he's in a wheelchair?
What'd you expect? It's like, come on, Eric, come on, let's go, Eric. Like,
Put him up.
that's
Put
like,
him up.
it's like you're in a wheelchair. Like, he's wearing a helmet. He's like, I like how the Sabretooth's like, let him go, Eric. And then he's like, oh, you want to play this game? Watch this. And then he cocks the gun, and he shoots the guy in the head and stops the bullet. And he goes, "You want to press your luck?" He's, I don't think I could stop them all, which he probably could stop them all, but he's like, I'm not going to because they're lesser. Like in which he was literally like Toad was walking with Rogue to like the car. Literally, I'm like, why doesn't Magneto just watch him walk to the car? Like he's like, I know where he is. He's but he's like instead he's like, oh, you're not getting away. Watch this. Which I think Magneto, I love that scene that how Charles is like not willing to he like, yeah, I could save Rogue right now, but then he's gonna kill all these people. And there's even a sequence, and before we wrap up, I want to say there's a sequence. I do like two things I want to touch on. One, I like when Wolverine stabs Rogue in the chest. Whenever like he has a knife, she stabs her in her chest and he goes, "Somebody help!" And then she touches him. And like literally, and I like how that is. And I love at the end when Magneto kidnaps Rogue. I keep saying Rose, it's Rogue.
It's Rogue.
And whenever she's like, she sees a dead body and he goes, "Are you gonna kill me?" And he goes, "Yes." Just baldly says, "Yes, I am." Like, doesn't even deny it or trick her. No, like, "Yes, I am." And he goes, "Why?" And she goes, "Because there is no difference." Because he says, because there is like, and he just gives a reason. Like, he gives a smart reason why he's going to kill her. He's like, and then he goes there, and then he just Sabretooth opens the curtains like this, and then it's like, that is the reason why I'm going to kill you because, he says, because I need to kill you to make everyone like him, turn mutants. I love how he was just like his idea philosophy is, look, like he tried to tell the X-Men, aren't you any of you trying to understand what I'm going to do? And I like it, like how he's trying to is like, I'm going to turn all of them. And that third act is so great in the Statue of Liberty, where like Wolverine has to stop it, and then like Cyclops like, I got a shot and I'm taking it, and he shoots Magneto in the back. He's like, ah, and then it goes down. And then I love that, like especially how Magneto gets arrested and put in a plastic prison.
I
And
was
he's
just
just
about to touch on the plastic prison because I love the scene where Magnus is like, "This plastic prison can't hold me forever. I will be back." And then Professor X is like, "And I will be there to
yeah.
stop you."
You know this plastic prison of theirs won't hold me forever. And I will always be there. Old friend.
And then it just swells up with the epic music and it just closes out that way. Just this movie's amazing. You know, I was going back and forth on great or amazing on my scale. This movie's amazing. This movie walked so many others like it
And
could run.
there's a line that before you said that scene there, he says, "Doesn't it bother you at night? Doesn't it bother you at night that," he says, "someone may come like lurking, coming for blood?" And he goes, "Oh, I feel poor." I'm butchering the line, but he goes, "Oh, I feel pity
A
for the
great
poor soul
swell
that
of
comes in."
pity for the poor soul who would attack my school. Or I'll put the clip in later, but it is something like that, and that is
And then
epic.
they say the same line in X-Men Apocalypse. They say the same line with McAvoy and Matt Fassbender. We're at the very end, at the very end of the movie, where Fassbender and Mag.
Someday they will pass that foolish law, or one just like it, and come for you. I feel a great swell of pity for the poor soul who comes to that school looking for trouble.
He says
Of
the same thing.
of all the movies to waste that epic line on, but that's a story for another time. Short story, long. X-Men 2000 is epic. It's
It is
outstanding.
a beautiful movie.
If you haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a while, we both can't recommend it enough. Go and watch it for yourself, especially with Deadpool and Wolverine coming out, because depending on what they touch on, there might be some relevance there. Who knows? But what did you all think of this movie if you have seen it? Let us know in the comments. Love to read what you have to say. And Jacob, thank you so much for joining me on this.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
You're going to be joining me again a little later this week talking about American Pie for the 1999 project.
I know. I've been buying apple pies and just getting ready for it.
I'm sure you have. But your channel is linked in the description. You're 1/3 of Small Talk here every Tuesday. Do you have anything coming up?
Yeah. Well, apple pies. It's called Pie Review, where I review all the pies and which one I'm getting, which one has the best entry, and the ones that have the bit list. But no. I have a review for A Quiet Place Part 2 coming out this week, and yeah, that's mostly what I'm have coming out this week, and that's about it. And Small Talk every week, and I try to get a new episode of Talking Silence rolling this week, and try. Fingers crossed. Yeah, that's about it.
All right. Well, as far as this channel goes, the road has started and will be continuing a little later this week by talking about X2 X-Men United. But for Jacob Collins, my name is Ryan Cam. We will see you all in the next one. Y'all take care.